Now, up here, there's my 300 amp electrical alternator and my 370 amp GP alternator. This is the one that was handling the Trunk Thunder Lithium yesterday, with just these two power runs running through the fuse block straight to the back. Now, there's a few ways I can connect power to tie these two systems together. One is I can connect a power wire from this alternator to this alternator, and that pulls the systems together. Another one would be to run a power wire from here to here, or from here to here. Any one of those things would tie the system together. But I want to be able to easily disconnect and reconnect those two systems. This alternator is capable of 300 amps, and this battery would add more power to it. So a 300 amp fuse probably really isn't big enough, but all it can do is trip, right? And then you just reset it. So after some consideration, I figured out that I can mount this right here, because the way these two screw holes line up, one lines up with this part of this handle, the other one lines up with that part. With two small little stubby screws, I could bolt that sucker down to that handle right there. And then I could run a power wire. This is a rough run, but I could run a power wire in from the back like this, follow it around, and then have it come back in over here and connect like that. That would give me my positive connection from the switch to the alternator. Then I could run a stubby. This is really too long, but I could build me a little stubby wire to run here to here. And basically, this would be the wire that's the trickiest to make. It would need to be just long enough to make this jump, and I'd probably want to use some of my New Concepts wire, because it's nice and soft and it'd be easier to bend. That'd be the hardest wire to make. This one will be easy. It's already made. I just need to put ends on it. So basically, you take two of these lugs and put them together. And set that right where we want it at. Not much wire in there. Well, let's put our Timco crimper back down. I got me a couple of little wire chunks on here to protect my little screws while it's not on here. This worked really good last time, so all I have to do is just pull one screw up a little bit, and then the whole thing just slips right out of there. And then we just tighten that one screw back down. And we got a nice stable crimping area. Now the tricky bit is going to be getting this, making this small enough to do the job. Now the good thing about it is this is basically an otherwise completely wasted wire. The only thing I'll be adding to the waste would be a lug if it doesn't work out. So positioning everything as it should be, approximately right there. That's a little long. It could be shorter. It needs to be about right there. So we need to come back all the way back, pretty much right about where that ridge is right there, which is kind of what I figured at the beginning. But it's always better to start long and work your way down. So we need to shorten this up some more. We're going to come right back to that ridge right there. Go through the shrink wrap and the insulation. And then we're going to need to cut some of this off. Some of this copper. About as much as we've trimmed off the insulation. Still leaving that a little bit long. I can always make it shorter. That may look crazy, but let's see if it works. So, setting it right there. Oh, you know what? Still needs to be shorter. Really? No, that'll work. I'm liking that. So, now that we have a dry fit, I want to do a wet fit. So before we crimp this down, I want to make sure that it'll actually go on the bolt, because I know this one's going around that bolt. I want to make sure there's clearance for everything to fit when it's in that position. And it looks like there is. That's going to work really well, just like that. All right, all we got to do is crimp it, insulate it, make it nice and safe and proper. With those little screws holding that base down right here, it makes this thing very sturdy. Now when I use this Tempco crimper, I like to make sure this pin right here is going under the underside of the lug. And I do two crimps. I do one in the center, as you can see. Then I push it forward on up in here. This is going to be a little trickier because of how short it is. And I catch it right on the edge of the lug and then do a second crimp. That makes a very solid connection and leaves a very pretty lug when it's done. So it's not only is it a solid connection, good reliable connection, but it's also aesthetic. Nice and clean, nice and straight. So after removing the heat shrink that was on that one, you see we have just a nice solid copper connection between these two. That should be a solid little bus bar. Essentially, that's what it is. And that Tempco crimper is just on time, man. Yeah, so I wanted a creative way to cover this whole thing. Grab me a couple pieces of this black. I'm going to slip them on like so. Bring them up to the center. And then we will cover the whole thing with that. So it'll make sense here in a second. And then we'll come in with the GP to give us a good coverage. And we end up with something that looks like that. Very clean, right? It doesn't look gimpy. It looks cool. So now, when we have that attached there, this guy will sit right there, and we'll have our connection made nice and clean and purposeful and solid. So I don't have this attached in any way yet except for just on this little stubby here, and it's so stiff that it literally, I can move the battery from that. There's nothing attaching, just this. You see that crap? Look at that. So when I put a screw here, just for added protection, that's going to be rock solid. All right, so this thing was super, completely rigid without this, but I went ahead and added a little screw here and this handle to give it one more little extra, and it ain't going anywhere. So now that we've got this side of it figured out, I got to finalize the design on the last part. Design whether I've already got a wire and a plan to do this, but I could also theoretically come up, come around, and come in on the side right here. Now when it comes to alt gauge wire, or any wire for that matter, not all wire is created equal. Even when you're looking at high quality OFC copper. For example, this is GP's diamond. It's really, really awesome wire. It's also pretty stiff. It's okay for making runs like this. You know, you can make a run like this. You could do a run like this. This would totally work, right? It would make the connection fine. Got this little guy here. This is a piece of New Concepts wire that's also sleeved up, and notice how much more flexible it is. So this wire would be more suitable for doing something where you got to squirrel it up inside like that or whatever, trying to make a little turns. But I also have this wire, and this is a high grade, marine grade OFC copper wire. So it's got the glue in it and all that, and it's extremely flexible. You can see that can be pulled up into a very small loop. And this might be the suitable wire to do the run, because I can make that curve, and then I can turn around and make this curve, essentially creating a piece that could run underneath these, right? Let's go ahead and get that copper strand out of my finger that got stuck in there. And before it wedges its way in there and makes a home. And I got a preliminary measurement. I'm going to cut it a little extra long because length is not a problem. But I had it be a little bit too long, it's a little bit too short. Yeah, that's a good spot for that. All right. So now we have our wire. It's nice flexible wire, good solid copper core, and we know it's going to be very protected. It's much thicker jacket than you'll find on your welding wire. It doesn't have the double layer protection here, and it also doesn't have quite as much copper as the GP American series, if you look. So let me show you that. So if we're looking at, if I can get that to focus, because I can't. But if we're looking at these two, I don't know if you guys can see it or not, but the American series has a bit more copper in it, and it has that double jacket. But we already know we're only going to be pulling around 300 amps. This will handle that no problem. And we know how tough that jacket is too. Plus the flexibility in this case is a very big asset. Do some nibble in here. Very nice. I only knocked a few strands off there. It'll be fine. Get in here and grab a lug. And like before, we always want to make sure that we have our position of our lug accounted for. And you'll notice I pulled this one off, pulled the heat shrink off. I want to make sure I had a good solid connection under there, and we do. So we're going to be able to reuse that. But I want to check now. I want to go test and make sure that after I run everything the way I want to run it, the lugs are in the position they need to be in so that the wire will lay the way I want it to. So if we feed this in here, we know how this is going to run. It's going to lay like this. This guy's going to lay like that. So that's going to work out just perfect if I put the lug right there. So then I keep that lug in that spot. So now when we go back over here where I've got this marked at, I just make sure I keep it right there as best I can. And stab it, lock it in. And on this Temco, I can do a couple of presses or even 3 of them. I like to do it enough to where I fold that whole bottom section in like that, and it makes a solid termination. Good solid electrical connection, and it's also a strong connection, and it's nice. It looks nice. Now all we gotta do is just clean it up. I'll go test it first though. Well, that's perfect. It ends up laying in here kind of like this. This connects to the block, this connects to the fuse. So it kind of loops back on itself. Now all we need to do is apply the heat shrink. So yeah, Bob's your uncle. So now the other thing I want to think about is this one has a larger diameter hole, and I think this will fit on there, but I'm gonna keep the larger one over here on this one because I know this has a fairly small stud. So let's run under here and have a look. That guy will hook right there. Then this guy will come in and leave at that angle and look purposeful. Like it. Now I just got to make it happen. That's already separated, which means this wire will be cold until I hook it up on the other end. So the best solution for this problem is to hook up this end first with the breaker turned off. That way I don't have to worry about the other end and what it's doing. If I hooked up the other end first, I would have a hot wire on this end until I got it hooked up. Order of operations. When possible, do it the safest possible way. The safest possible way is to keep the wire cold as long as you can. It's a good connection. Give it a little grunt, and that's good. So now when that happens, both batteries are connected together. That happens, they're not. You guys a better show. Yep, we're just gonna have to look at it some. That's it. So if you guys are wanting to do good work on cabling, these are the tools that you need to get that done. This thing here was like 20 bucks on Amazon. I beat the tar out of it and it just keeps giving. It's a Genesis heat gun. So that's the temperature ranges it runs. And that's what it does. Then I got these cutters with a crappy, they came with a crappy crimper. The combination was relatively inexpensive, but you can also get these separate. And pay attention to how these jaws are shaped. and how the handles look. Find these on Amazon. These are excellent wire cutters. And then the Temco crimper. I went through like 4 different crimpers, and I have yet to find one that is better than this guy. And the way I have it set up on my table is I just have a screw on the back and on the front. So kind of pinning this part down here, and it makes it stay put on the table. So it just does what it's supposed to do. You adjust the temping, with this, turn this, and this gives you your different crimping sizes. It'll crimp up to a 4 gauge, I think. I know it'll crimp an 8 gauge, no problem. And yeah, it'll crimp a 4 alt gauge all the way down to an 8 gauge, no problem. So yeah, rock solid. There's nothing to lose. All the stuff you need is right here. There's not a bunch of manuals to keep up with. This thing's awesome. So I want to make a custom holder for my little dude here. I got a piece of PVC pipe that I used as a standoff once, and it won't quite fit on here. So we're going to help it fit. That's the plan anyway. It's working pretty good. Sliding right on in there. Got to make sure I can get it back off of there. Want to get it good and hot. Melt the crap out of it. I got a plan. I'll show you. Get it good and hot. Melt it on there. Slide it out. Slide it back in. Oh, that's where the end of it is. That's why it wouldn't go in any further. So that's what we want right there. I want to push it on up on there though. I want the end to come out. I want it to go all the way up against this part. Once we got it all the way up on there like that, you can see I've already got my tool to tighten up my power leads on my amp. It sits right there. All right. Let's slip this in here. And this little cup, this little wire management deal. Get it just in there, just so. That works. Get good and tight. And then, hopefully, I can get this loose enough to where it pulls out pretty easy. Might take a little bit of poking, but it ain't got to go all the way in there. It's just got to go in there that far. So, that gives me all my tools here. And it's a start, you know. Kind of a work in progress, but you get the idea.